Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the BCO NextGen Scotland Tour of Scotland. I am Gary Scott and the chair of the BCO NextGen in Scotland. Before we continue on, I would just like to thank our generous sponsors, Alpha Scotland and Stratus UK, along with our media partners, Jano Media, for all of their hard work in pulling this production together. In this video, you will see the BCO NextGen committee members virtually tour Scotland from the comfort of their own makeshift home offices. They will be interviewing some key industry figures and finding out about their developments across the country. This last year and the start of this year has provided us with some huge challenges at home and at work. The way we work and the way we live has significantly changed. In the coming months, we look forward to exploring these challenges and changes to the workplace, and hopefully we'll see you in person. Lastly, I would like to thank our committee members for their hard work on this project and also the interviewees who gave up their time to discuss their developments.
We're in the North East and our good news story of 2020 for Aberdeen is the Merchant Building. I'm delighted to be joined by Pam Grant of Pamela Grant Developments, who has been working with Patrizia on the development. Welcome, Pam. And firstly, congratulations on securing planning permission for the project. Can you tell us a bit about your vision for the project?
Yes, thanks, Teresa, and thank you for asking me to join you today. So the Merchant Building was designed very much with the historic area of the Merchant City in mind. For those of you who know Aberdeen, the Merchant City is one of the oldest parts of Aberdeen, and it still remains today a very important architectural and historic area in the city. The green where the building is situated and Market Street was originally the market area in Aberdeen where the traders and the boats would come into the harbour and customers would gather to conduct their business and trade goods. And Patrizia very much wanted to bring that kind of a historical feeling back by way of a kind of contemporary building to add to the character of the existing buildings. One of the kind of key drivers for the design was to contribute to the cultural offering that already exists in the green and ensure the external public realm space was as attractive as the building itself. The green is an area where there's already established art festivals such as New Art, and there's jazz festivals take place during the summer, and it's also an area where there's a lot of independent shops and restaurants. And Patrizia wanted to build on that identity with space dedicated to art, sculptures and public realm improvements so people could sit outside and enjoy. The building itself is over 10 stories. It's designed to be a landmark building. It can be seen from all areas in the city, and it offers fantastic views from within the building as well. It's got a unique lantern design on the top floor, created to be a beacon to draw people to that area of the city. And that space will be great event space for people to use and allow people to enjoy the fantastic views over the city and the harbour. Sustainability, again, was very important in terms of the design. You can see from the images there's a lot of green walls, both outside and internally. And it's a question of kind of blurring and kind of integrating the external space and the internal space. The building itself reduces the footprint of the existing building, and that additional space that's created is really dedicated to the public realm space and improving the external environment.
Now, you've already mentioned the historic site as the Aberdeen Market, and I understand the building currently houses a collection of retailers. There's been a lot of discussion, particularly this year, about the demise of the high street and the need for us to repurpose and regenerate our high streets. How do you think the Merchant Building seeks to achieve that?
Well, from our point of view, we kind of looked at the connectivity of where this building sits in the city centre. It sits between the transport hub down at Union Square and Union Street, Marshall Square, and Bon Accord. And really, from our point of view, it was about bringing people back into the city centre and creating that kind of dwell time. So as people come up from the train station or the bus station, it was kind of creating activity at ground floor level with restaurants, cafes, and encouraging the outdoor activities so that we have this event space that can be used. As well, there's kind of, when this building is going to be built, there's going to be over 1,200 people working here. So from our point of view, it's bringing people back into the city centre, not just to work, but to go out to meet people at lunchtime and have that kind of social space that they can enjoy as well. So from our point of view, it's creating that kind of social connection again.
Absolutely. Now, COVID has radically changed our relationship with the traditional office, and some might say that a city centre office development of this size at this point in time is a bit of a leap of faith. What would be your response to that?
Well, from my point of view, I think people want to, especially the younger generation, I think, they're kind of keen to return to the office. Social engagement and collaboration is very important. And mentoring is very difficult to do over Zoom or Teams or whatever. So it's all about, I think, getting that company culture back into our work environment. And, from my point of view, I think people are missing those chats in the kitchen and, going out for a coffee. So I think when companies return after the pandemic, it's very much about a flight to quality. They will want to be in good quality buildings where there's excellent, collaboration areas, good quality fit outs, and, M&E will be important in terms of, creating that good overall environment and sustainability as well. So from my point of view, it's about companies kind of feeling that they can attract and retain the kind of quality staff. And for that, they need to be in the right building. And merchant building is one of these buildings that's going to create that environment for people.
Thanks very much, Pam, for speaking to us today about the merchant building. It looks like a great project, and we're really looking forward to seeing it take shape over the next couple of years. Thanks again.
Thank you very much for having me.
So this is the BCO discussion for the Earl building in Dundee. It's myself, David Sim from Atelier 10, who's a BCO NextGen member. I've got David Hendry, who's Associate Director at Cooper Cromer, and Simon Walsh, who is a Director at Cooper Cromer. They were both working on the Earl building project. Simon, I'll just start by saying, would you be able to give a brief background on the Earl building and how it ties in with the wider £1 billion transformation of Dundee's waterfront?
Yeah, by all means. So we've been involved in the project for a number of years, but the history of the site goes back much further than that. Probably historically being with the post-industrial decline of the jute and the shipbuilding industries in Dundee. The Dundee waterfront site, the master plan was originally conceived in 1998, comprises of 240 acre site stretching 8 kilometres along the Dundee waterfront site. Obviously, the V&A Museum is a pivotal part of that, but our involvement goes back probably about 3 or 4 years to the first commercial office building, which is on Plot 6. Which we developed in conjunction with Dundee City Council and Robertson's.
That's great, thank you. David, would you be able to, I know the Earl building was the sort of first development among the empty plots opposite the V&A and the new train station, also the hotel. Did this add greater pressure or significance to the building?
Well, absolutely. I mean, they made a fantastic start. Very ambitious programme, whole new waterfront for the city, whole new open vista to the city, attracting attention from all around the world. You're right next to the V&A Museum, which was very well received. There's a new train station going up. So, all the focus of Dundee was on the waterfront. We absolutely we're setting a benchmark for quality and to try and push on really with the commercial heart of the city now, and to start delivering jobs and prosperity for Dundee.
That's great, thanks. Simon, at the concept stage of the project, the building had quite stringent benchmarking criteria. It's going along BCO guidelines, Grade A office, BREEAM Excellent, EPCA. Were all these initial targets met? And I'm just wondering if you could maybe mention the sort of general spec of the building as well.
Yeah, but by and large they were. We find it quite interesting. We've been involved in a number of buildings in, kind of set within this kind of context. So there's a number of challenges. As David mentioned, this was the first building, with the first commercial office building within the overall Dundee master plan. It's actually the first building within one of the plots where there will ultimately be another 3 buildings. So the first challenge is really trying to develop an office which has 3 active elevations. The 4th one will ultimately form a gable condition with the next phase of the building, which could either be potentially another office building or maybe a hotel, which is always a challenge. The other commercial challenge is, interestingly, in a regional city like Dundee, and other cities like Inverness and down in England, places like Leeds and Liverpool are similar in that the commercial mathematics between build cost and ultimate rental values always makes delivering a Grade A office very, very difficult. We don't have the benefit of City of London budgets, which might be £300 or £400 a square foot. So very limited budgets which reflect rental values, but you then have to try and balance that against delivering Grade A quality space. So that was probably one of the key project challenges. But in terms of BCO compliance, we're generally, I'd say we're about 99% compliant. Probably the only deviation, there was a couple of areas, the first one being cycle storage. So we quite often take a view on cycle storage. BCO assumes that there are no other cycle facilities in the vicinity, but Dundee does have a cycle share scheme which allowed us to take an objective view on relaxing that requirement a little bit. And another one which we quite routinely relax is the ceiling height criteria. So with the depth of plan of the office buildings, the ceiling should really be about 3 meters clear. But in this instance, there's almost an unwritten industry standard, which is somewhere between 2.7 and 2.8 meters. And we with our office buildings, we quite routinely, if we do deviate from the BCO standards, default to what is almost, the sort of the industry standard, if that makes sense.
It's recognised though, Simon, in terms of the glazing and everything else. The office plates are flooded with light.
Yeah.
How bright they are. It's a risk. So because we've got the full height windows, you don't almost notice the ceiling height. In terms of boom for buck as well, the palette of materials that we've got there, really making the budget stretch. The glass spec in particular, I would say, is one of the best we've used. I think it works particularly well, but it's being selective about those specific elements and making sure we capture that, and it's to give the quality product in the end. I think it does stand up well.
Yeah, and I think another aspect which isn't necessarily set out in the BCO standards is sustainability. And that's not just environmental sustainability; it's social sustainability too. The building was procured through the SCAPE process, which requires kind of the protection of local jobs and keeping investments local to the site. So I think maybe about 10% of the building was procured within 10 miles of the site. I think it then went to 75%, within 20 miles, and then the remainder within 40 miles. Which isn't explicitly stated in the BCO standards, but that's just sustainable and socially sustainable good practice.
That's great, thanks. I guess this is sort of for both of you, this one. So the building was submitted for the BCO Awards in 2020. Brief update on how you got on.
David, I'll let you take that one.
Well, yeah, we were lucky enough to be successful in the regional awards, and it was a great team effort and fantastic news. We're very pleased.
Am I right in saying so that then goes up to the national awards as well after winning the regional award? You go out for the national, is that correct?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So we're now pitted against the regional winners for the rest of the UK, which Interestingly, it's always a little bit of a challenge because particularly with commercial office buildings, you find yourself pitted against the best commercial office building in the City of London. And it will be interesting to see how we fare with that.
Yeah. Simon, what would you feel is the biggest success of the building is?
I think setting a benchmark. It was good to both in terms of quality and the aesthetic design of the building. As we mentioned, it's always a challenge working on or designing a building which has no context. So with other building typologies, with sort of cultural buildings or maybe residential buildings, it wouldn't be uncommon for them to stand alone and for them to make their own statement. But there were two real challenges which we would like to think we converted into successes with the old grey building, which was it's not a complete building at the moment. Whilst the office building is complete within itself, it's not complete as an overall piece of kind of urban city development. And one of the other challenges was we didn't design the office in isolation of what we thought the remaining buildings were going to look like. And as it stands at the moment, its neighbours and its adjoining buildings could be offices, it could be residential, it could be hotel. And I think so far we're very pleased with how it's turned out.
That's great, thanks. And finally, David, is there anything you would change with the building at all?
It's one of these things that when you're coming off the back of a project, you see the niggles and and it takes a while for you to view it in the round. Obviously, it's going to change and move as the building has been let. There will be a tenant coming in and they will be fitting it out. It's always interesting to see. It's a bit frustrating you only ever get to take a shell so far. And again, the proof will be in the pudding. How well does it function, and learning those lessons. Normally, if you're lucky, you maybe go back after a year and you're doing your snagging, and maybe it's been occupied straight away. Maybe you can see how it's evolved. But no, I mean it's a shell building, and I think we were pleased with the palette of materials that we did manage to get agreed and kept with. There was a lot of budgetary pressures along the way, but I think we held out for the glass spec. We got the bricks that we wanted. The material is there. It's a quality product, and hopefully it will weather well. And as the place gets built out, it will settle into the landscape.
That's great. Thank you both for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hayley Johnston. I am a project manager with Reed Mitchell based in Edinburgh.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Mark Broderick. I'm the Development Director for BAM Properties covering Scotland, and I'm based in Glasgow.
Mark, thank you for joining us today to talk about Capital Square, which is a new office development located in the heart of Edinburgh's business district. Can you tell us a little bit more about the project and some of the key features?
Yeah, sure, Hayley. So Capital Square is a new 123,000 square foot Grade A office development in the heart, as you say, of Edinburgh. It's 110 public car spaces on the lower 4 floors, followed by office car parking, and the offices are ranged over ground in 7 upper floors.
We've mentioned that it is in the heart of Edinburgh, and the site itself is very restricted in terms of space. How have your team adapted to the challenges of building right in the centre of Edinburgh?
The location and the constraints around the site have been a real challenge for the team. We have a major Grade A building to the east of us. We have the Edinburgh Film Theatre to the west of us, and we have the Sheraton Hotel behind us. So it's been a very tight site. I think key to all of that to successfully developing has been the engagement we've had with the occupiers around us. So we've had a specific team put together who have had monthly meetings with all of our neighbours to ensure that they're fully updated on what's happening each month as we come into the period. And we've really had to make huge efforts to try and take them with us and address any concerns they've got. I mean, the Edinburgh Film Theatre, for instance, have had 2 Edinburgh Film Festivals that they've had to try and operate through our continued working. So it's been very much about engagement with the adjoining occupiers, but also for the site team. The tightness of the site has meant that we don't have any areas for laying down materials. So a kind of just-in-time delivery process has been key to the development as well, with lorries coming in at 7 a.m. in the morning and basically preloading the site for that day's activities. So these have been features that we've had to kind of incorporate into the development to make sure that things progress on plan.
Yeah, sounds very challenging indeed, but I'm sure we're all looking forward to seeing another addition to Edinburgh's skyline. It's been a very challenging year for most. In your opinion, what impact do you see the events of this year having on the future of office spaces?
Well, that's the $1 million question, and lots of people are wrestling with exactly that issue at the moment. We are hearing stories of the decline of the office going forward. I suspect that's not the case at all. I think from an employer point of view, probably a lot of employers have now found that their staff can operate quite effectively and successfully from home, and I think back office and processing activities are something that we can all do quite happy from home. But I think the office still has a key role for most organisations going forward, whether that's the collaborative working that's needed, the recruitment and the bringing through of new talent and the mentoring. These are all activities that the office is still going to be needed for. And we're social animals at the end of the day. I think most people still would like to be in the office in some way, shape or form. I suspect going forward that the working week will be very different for everybody. We may have a day or 2 days working from home where it suits, but I still think that the office will play a key role for us all going forward, and that most occupiers, although they may end up having slightly less space, I don't think it's going to be a dramatic reduction in the amount of space that they occupy. I think what they will do is they'll use the space very differently in the future. The rows of bench desking will probably go, and we'll see far more flexible collaborative spaces. We'll see better breakout areas, and very much I think the office will become a collaborative working area with a very, very different style to maybe it has at the moment.
In our projects, we're definitely seeing more of that come into play in the design for occupiers, and it'll be very interesting to see where that goes in the future. Thank you for your time, Mark, and good luck with the future of Capital Square.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
So our Good News Stories covers key Scottish markets, and we felt that this Glasgow building was an exceptional project that highlights many of our key trends which we set out at the start of the year. Today I'm joined by Dan Maid of Bywater, who's here to tell us about Mclennan Works. Hi Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Hey Christine, no worries.
For those who don't know, can you please provide us with an overview of Mclennan Works and the vision behind the refurbishment?
Well, Mclennan Works is a building that was formerly known as Breckenridge House. It's had a fair few different uses in its time. It's been an office building as it is now, of varying different standards of dress, if you like. It's also been a department store, and various other retail units are within the block. We've renamed it Mclennan Works as part of a rolling 2-stage refurbishment of the entire project, internally and externally. It's around about 45,000 square feet of offices over 3 floors above a parade of retail on Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow. In terms of the vision behind the property, we love the property. We love the way that it looks. It was built in 1855. It's a listed building. It has all the kind of attractive blonde sandstone kind of features you'd expect from a Glasgow building, but it also has some degree of flexibility, or at least ability to create flexibility within the office space and on the internal elements. We also really like the location. It's in a great spot, we believe, in Glasgow. Maybe not the prime spot in terms of the CBD location, but certainly a strong part of the Sauchiehall Street pitch, nearby to the Glasgow School of Arts and Glasgow Film Theatre, various other cultural touchpoints there. So when we looked at this property in the first instance, it was really quite a simple decision for us to sort of get involved in it. The vision itself, in terms of the detail of the refurbishment, was to take what was quite a tired building internally in terms of the internal fit outs of particularly the office space, refurbished that extensively, at the same time improving what improvements we could make to the environmental and the ESG, I guess, elements of the building as much as we can with a listed building, but also to restructure and recalibrate, reconfigure the office space to make it more in keeping with what the market in Glasgow is requiring. At the point at which we bought this, and still we saw a lack of supply in Glasgow in terms of small office suites of up to between 500 square feet and 1,000 square feet, and also equally a small supply of sort of 4,000 to 5,000 square foot office suites. And in Mclennan Works, we've hit that really. We've got 10 suites on the first floor of between 500 and 1,000 square feet, and 2 suites on the top floor of 5,000 square feet each, approximately. So we believe, and we're seeing it as the market's recovering, believe it or not, during pandemic, that the market will react well to that. There's it certainly seems like there's latent demand for that kind of space. It's quite a lot of information. Does that help?
No, that's great. That's great. So one of the things that you actually touched on was the location. So Mclennan Works is obviously based on Sauchiehall Street, which is probably one of the best known streets in Scotland. It's got home to a number of notable buildings and department stores, or it was historically, and music venues and things like that. But I think over the last couple of years, the streetscape has completely changed on Sauchiehall Street. And the next question is, was that regeneration of the surrounding area a key driver for the refurbishment?
Yeah, I think so. It's probably a key driver for our initial interest in the building as well. Bywater itself is a relatively forward-looking, interesting property company that likes challenging projects. And if you look across our portfolio across the country, all of our buildings are in fringe, straight, challenging locations. And Sauchiehall Street, albeit the strengths that you described, this history behind it, across the length of Sauchiehall Street, there's elements of struggle in terms of regeneration terms, and certainly this part of Sauchiehall Street is no different. That's not been helped by changes to the retail landscape that have happened pre-pandemic and probably will continue to happen, almost in a different but no less acute way post-pandemic. So, we looked at this building on its own, and we liked it, and we liked the challenge of the location. And what's helped us, and what helped our kind of underwrite and our understanding of that position, is we knew that Glasgow City Council were committed to regenerating the city centre wholesale as they are, but also specifically this part of Sauchiehall Street. And that was important to know that there was at least some investment coming down the line. And we've seen that the benefits of that as we've been on site with our project, that the City Council have improved the areas immediately out at the front of the building in terms of public realm with the avenues part, the part of the avenues project that translates to here. It helps from our perspective that it's most evident at the front of the property in terms of the cycling lanes that are now in place along Sauchiehall Street, and that really talks to a common theme we have across our buildings in terms of, again, coming back to the environmental social governance, kind of managing as much as we can with listed buildings like this, improving the carbon impact of real estate, and little things like having the cycle lanes. Not only do they improve accessibility to the retail spaces, but they also improve accessibility to our office suites for those that want to cycle. We've actually sort of welcomed this with open arms on the Glasgow project. Again, across our portfolio, we've recently procured some bikes that we're going to be putting in the basement of the building as part of the pool bike scheme, so tenants can use those bikes in a partnership that we're working with a company called Cycle of Good. So that was, that's been really important. In terms of the sort of cultural touch points around the building, it was kind of really a no-brainer. We've got the Glasgow School of Arts at that point when we were buying this. The new building hadn't been affected by the fire that unfortunately took hold there, but we do now have obviously that repair and refurbishment project is going on along the road at the rear of the property, but we do now have Glasgow School of Arts as an immediate neighbour now in Mclennan Galleries at the rear of the building. But over and above that, we also have Glasgow Film Theatre and various other cultural touch points around there. So for us, coming back to our regen kind of interest in the area, there's all of those kind of cultural touch points around there. We've got other land uses around, including retail, and you can't underestimate the attraction for office tenants of having a Nando's opposite, for example. Goes a long way to helping in terms of encouraging tenants to come to the building. That there's restaurants around and cafes around and lots of things to do. So that's really important for us.
So 2020 gave us lots of time to reflect on the future of the workplace in a post-COVID world by design and by occupation. And we believe that a more sustainable building will be the focus of many occupiers going forward, the focus on the green credentials. Given the age and the listing of Mclennan Works, what steps have been taken to make the building as green as possible?
Well, I guess to pick up that point, you're quite right. It's difficult to be as green as you would probably like to be with a building that's 170 years old and listed. Notwithstanding, it's a beautiful building, Mclennan Works, but that sandstone on the front of the building is expensive to maintain and tricky to maintain, and we found that. But there's only so much you can do with a refurbishment or retrofitting of an existing building. But we think, in terms of first principles, that's probably the best thing you can do. Actually, is that we are as Bywater, we're coming on site with new build development projects which are really cutting edge and really forward thinking in terms of some of the materials we're using to minimise the carbon impact of our part of the minimising the carbon impact of the real estate market in this country. So we're using things like CLT, cross-laminated timber, to build frames in Vauxhall and places like that, which are really cutting edge, but on new build. There's only so much you can do with a refurbishment of an existing building. But the important thing is, I think, not that we would ever have been able to do this or wanted to do this in Mclennan Works, but just by reusing the buildings, we believe that you are saving an inordinate amount of embedded carbon by not knocking those buildings down and chucking them into landfill. Again, not that we would have done that in Mclennan. So it's important to make that point, because in other situations across the country, we are working with buildings that we probably could have knocked down and rebuilt, but we think it's the right way to do things is to work with what you've got and reuse. So that's the first kind of comment. What we have done, though, within the building, we are limited to what we can do with that building because it's listed. There's only so much you can do within the internal bits of the property from a cost perspective, notwithstanding that which you can actually structurally do. But we have done things like change all of the lights over to LEDs, change to a pump and heat system, VRV, and air conditioning system, which have made incredible savings from even just an EPC perspective. Our EPC rating pre the refurbishment or the partial refurbishment was a D, and we're now up to B. With the next stage of refurbishment of the second floor, at some point when we do that, we will probably make some more improvements to things like windows and things like that, which will improve the EPC rating more. So that's the kind of what we can do with the building in terms of the embodied carbon and the refurbishment process. But then we have this next step as the building starts to fill up with tenants, where we can encourage some of our hopes and dreams in terms of our view versus carbon and ESG. We can try and take the tenants with us on that route, and things that we're doing at the moment with our managing agents in terms of as the block fills up is encourage things like the pool bike scheme, which we mentioned previously, which is we've procured the bikes from a company called Cycle of Good, who recycle old UK postal bikes. So there's a couple of messages we're hitting there. We're hopefully encouraging people to cycle to work, and we're also using recycled bikes to do that. So that's great on two counts. We're also doing things like into our tenant handbook, not so much into the leases, but we are encouraging tenants as much as we can to work with us on recycling targets for the building, and looking at, and we're doing this across our portfolio, looking at ways that rather than penalise tenants for not recycling, we can encourage tenants to recycle. reward systems for hitting recycling targets and things like that through the building. We're also going to be implementing kind of more user-friendly interfaces and things like that actually help all of us track the energy use that we're and the amount of recycling that we're doing on site. On energy use, again, without the ability or the desire really to force things onto tenants, we will be encouraging tenants across all of our buildings, including Mclennan Works, to work with a registered green energy procurement provider, and really challenging them to say, look, give us a good reason why we shouldn't be. We'll procure all of the landlord side energy from that provider, but you need to give us a good reason to tell us why you're not going to use these guys as well. So we kind of try and do as many things as we can during the operational phase, and I think that's all you can really do with a listed building like Mclennan Works. In other buildings, there's the opportunity to put solar panels on roofs and things like that, but you are restricted with a building like Mclennan Works to do everything. But we're doing as much as we can, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. That's me and my questions. It's been great speaking with you, Dan, and I truly do believe that Bywater and the design team have done an incredible job, I think, of transforming not only the building but the streetscape in general, and the plans that you have for the building going forward, and your openness to speak with occupiers is I wish you all the success with that. I think it'll be really successful. I
think on that final point, and one thing we haven't talked about, I don't know how interesting it is for BCO audience, but the other thing that, in terms of the way that the market is changing in Glasgow and across the country, is that what we found, and you'll know, Kirsty, from this kind of year working on Mclennan, is that in terms of what tenants want at the moment, it's just changing so quickly. So not only have people say, what does the world look like when we come out of lockdown for offices? Well, I think people will still occupy offices. We've all worked from home. We've all seen that for some people it works, for some people it doesn't. For me personally, it does not. But people will come back to offices, but I think tenants and individual employers will be much more selective about where they work. So for people like us, developers and asset managers, you've got to create something that is different from a start. So Mclennan Works kind of hits that all over the place because it's the spaces are beautiful and everything like that. Then you've got to create the environment for them to want to be in, and then fundamentally the big thing is you've got to create a structure whereby you can do a deal with an occupier. And at the moment, that's the really tricky thing that's changing so much. We're fielding inquiries from traditional occupiers that just want a straight up and down lease, and people on the other side of the extreme that want to come out of serviced offices and want a desk rate and everything paid for. And that's the challenge. That's the real challenge, I think, for office owners coming out of this post-pandemic. And that's exciting. It just means we've got to work a lot harder and be a lot more creative about what we do across the piece.
Yeah, I think you guys are going to be in a good place for that, though, definitely, going forward.
Hello, my name is Neil Hemingway, incoming BCO Scotland NextGen Chair and Architect at 360 Architecture. As we wrap up on our tour of Scotland, I would just like to extend a huge thank you to all of our speakers for taking the time to explain the success stories of each building. We'd also like to give a special thank you to our sponsors, Alpha Scotland and Stratus, who helped Jano Media, our excellent video production team, develop this digital tour. As we start in Aberdeen at the Merchant Building, it is clear that this building will help regenerate the heart of Aberdeen by transforming the old market into a thriving modern hub where the externals and internal spaces blur together. It's a great example of how mixed-use commercial development can give back to the city through public realm, street activation and social connection. Moving further south to Dundee, the Earl Grey building sets the benchmark in quality for the extensive £1 billion Transformation Dundee Waterfront Regeneration Project, a worthy regional award winner and definitely one to watch at the National BCO Awards later in the year. Moving to Edinburgh and Capital Square, it was great to see how this project overcome difficult site logistics to become a new addition in Edinburgh skyline. Capital Square takes full advantage of this landmark building's city centre location and excellent sustainability credentials to become a prime working environment. And then moving to our final project, Mclennan Works in Glasgow. The greenest building is one that already exists.
It's great to see that the Mclennan works reinvigorate an existing tired building into a true gem and exemplar commercial high street refurbishment, improving the building's sustainability credentials to become a key commercial destination on Sauchiehall Street. The project knits into the surrounding context and builds on the City Council's urban realm improvements and existing cultural touchpoints. It's clear to tell from these 4 buildings that there's a lot of positivity coming out of Scotland's commercial sector. As we look towards the future of workspace, it's important to remember what social role that offices play. We are all social animals, and it's the interaction that we crave with each other. The office is not dead, it simply needs to reinvent itself to become incubators for social engagement, collaboration, and mentoring. This reimagining of what offices of the future will become is very exciting, and as BCO NextGen, we are looking forward to taking you on this journey with us. Thank you to all of our speakers, sponsors, and video editing team, and even more importantly, thank you for watching.